had you this time. Alright, let me give you one of your points. I think I'll win the next one. Okay, yeah, Blue. Don't rub it in that you won the staring contest. Ooh, is that a pumpkin that you drew? Oh, do you want to focus on organic shaped pumpkins? Sounds like a plan. Let's get started. Okay, so you will need a piece of paper. I chose a piece of blue paper because it's going to help with my picture, but it doesn't have to be blue. Just if you don't use a colored piece of paper, then it's going to be more important that you fill in all the little white areas, okay? I have an orange oil pastel, so you get an orange pastel or crayon or a marker. I have a yellow pastel, so get one of the things that you have. I have a red oil pastel, blue oil pastel, purple, light green oil pastel, dark green oil pastel, a black oil pastel, and you can't see it because I accidentally cropped it. My bad. A white oil pastel. So, get these things ready. If you have pastels, awesome, use them, but you will have messy hands. So have a sink ready to use. Again, you can use all the other materials too. So, make it work. I believe in you. Let's do it. Alright, now that I have all my supplies, I have my paper and the landscape orientation, and I can begin drawing. I'm going to grab the red oil pastel, and I'm going to actually start off at the bottom corner of my paper. I'm going to start by making an oval, so it's a long, squishy circle oval. So again, if you're doing it with this other materials, that's perfectly fine. They don't blend as well, but they'll work. I kind of fix out my oval. My oval is a little bit squishy, but that's okay. I'm going to go to the top of my oval and make a backwards letter C that goes all the way down to the bottom. Starts at the top, goes all the way down to the bottom. Now a normal letter C that's stretched from the top all the way to the bottom. And I'm going to add a little stem before I continue. And then I'm going to add two more, well, one backward C and one normal C. From the top all the way to the bottom, top all the way to the bottom. Oh my goodness, it's a pumpkin. It's a cool pumpkin. It's a pumpkin. I'm singing the pumpkin song. Alright, so we want to give our pumpkin some pizzazz. So I'm going to add a couple of different colors while I make my pumpkin. So I'm going to grab my orange, and I'm going to watch out how I'm going to grab my paper, but I am going to go around the border of the red, so I'm getting pretty close to the red, and I'm with oil pastel not coloring perfectly because oil pastel is able to blend, but I am still filling some nice space there, and I am putting some pressure on the pastel so that the color pops off more. If you feel like your color is really light, it's probably because you're not putting enough pressure on it. So I'm going around that first oval. The inside of the oval, I'm adding orange to it. Orange, orange, orange. Orange, you glad we're making a pumpkin? Okay, then I'm going to take yellow. Yellow is going to be my middle. So I'm going to add my yellow to the middle. And right now, it just kind of looks funky because nothing is blended. Okay? So if you're using a different material, you're going to have a bit of a harder time blending. But you're going to see me grab my red. And when I blend with oil pastels, I kind of move in a circular way. And I'm not pushing as hard here. So I'm kind of going with little baby circles, little baby circles. I'm going from the red into the orange a little bit. And then what you can start to see is you can start to see that color kind of squish out into the red a bit. When I say red, I mean orange. So it's kind of moving into the orange a little bit. I'm just going to confuse you. Da, 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 blending, little baby circles. Blending, blending, blending. If you are using a different material, like colored pencils, you can layer. So I take some red and I draw on top of the orange, and color on top of the orange, and then I take some orange and I color on top of the red. So I stack a lot. Same with crayons. Markers is a little bit harder. So now I'm taking my orange and I'm blending it into my yellow. So I'm doing some circles here. Circle, 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 circle. So typically when we're coloring, we kind of go in a ziggy-zaggy type of motion. So pay attention to the motion when you are putting your pastel on paper and blending. Yeehaw. So circle, 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 circles. Circles. Okay. So yeah, markers are a little bit harder to blend. You can stack those a little bit too, but I'm kind of interested to see what you guys can come up with. And if it's going to be like a different toned type of a drawing where there's no blending at all, that's fine too. That'll look pretty neat. So you can see now that I have this section pretty blended. Now I'm going to get my orange again. I'm going to go to the next little row, and the same thing except I don't have as much space. So I'm going to go along the outside of the red. I'm going to go along that line all the way down, tend to come up again around the other side. So this process is kind of like the same thing over and over again. I go around the outside of that line with the orange, and then I begin to fill it in with yellow, and then I take my other colors and I overlap and blend. So I'm going to show you the section again. We're adding that middle section, the red. I'm going to go along the red and the orange in light circles. Circle, 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 circle. So that those tones will blend together. And it's going to look lovely. It's pumpkin time because it's officially fall. Fall has pumpkins. Pumpkin song. Sing all day long. Okay, now I'm going to take my yellow. Nope, just getting my orange. And I'm going to blend it into the yellow. Yellow, yellow, yellow. And voila! Easy squeezy. Alright, so I'm going to fast forward to the next step because it's literally the same thing over and over again. Remember, while you are doing this, pastels, they're really blendable, so they do a nice job when I'm trying to get them to work together color-wise, go from one color to the next, etc., etc., etc. So that's nice. If you're using marker, you'll have a harder time with it, but I think it will look really neat. So just work with what you have, and if you're using crayons and colored pencils, those are stackable, so you can blend with them. It just might take a little bit more pressure to get them to blend. So I'm going to fast forward now. Alright, so now I'm taking red back out and I'm kind of outlining, getting a little bit more pressure through the outsides of my pumpkin to get those lines a little bit darker. I do feel like the bottom of my pumpkin will be a little bit more shadowed. And later, I'm going to be getting black out to give it a bit more of a drop shadow. But I'm going to give it a little bit more red tones towards the bottom. Yay! So whenever I'm coloring anything that is a three-dimensional object, I never use one flat tone because it's boring and it doesn't show the three-dimensional side. So more tones. Now I'm going into my stem. I grabbed some brown. I'm going to fill it in all brown. Did I say brown pastel? I don't think I did. You'll need something brown. Anyways, I'm going to shake my paper off because it's getting a little bit funky. Once I've colored with the brown, I'm going to take out some green, and I'm going to be going back in with black because that stem needs some black. I'll get there, don't you worry. Alright, so now I'm going to be adding the ground. I never put my ground perfectly underneath my project. I always kind of go in the middle. And this is going to be kind of a hilly type of a ground here. so it's not a perfectly flat ground. So I'm seeing where it's going to meet on the other side, and then I'm going to see it right about in there. And my lines are a little bit dashed here because I'm going to add a lot of texture to my project with these lines. So now I'm going to add some grass. So you can see I'm going to add some little lines that come down. They're not super crazy long, but they're longer than you might think just because, well, I'm kind of zooming into my pumpkin, so I'm thinking about scale. And I'm picturing like longer grass for this too. So I'm going to be adding this grass, little lines here and there. I don't ever like to add my lines perfect, in perfect uniform straight lines here, because I feel like grass is a little bit more flowy and free to breeze around, especially in a pumpkin patch. You might have some long grass here and there. So I'm getting faster, and since I'm using oil pastel, and if you're using oil pastel, be careful about where you put your hand. So I'm not trying to rest my hand on my paper. I'm trying to make sure I'm just using my fingerprints just to hold up my hand and support the paper, because if I get my hands messy and touch other areas of my paper, it's going to get all yucky looking. So lines, 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 lines. Little lines, yay! And fill in the space. So I'm using this dark green, and I have lots of other greens too. When I say lots, I mean one other. I have one other green that I'm going to be using to add to the grass. I'm even going to get around my pumpkin, underneath it a little bit. Yours might be off the paper, but depending on where yours is, you should be filling the ground space with lines. So assume it goes all the way from that line we added all the way to the bottom of your paper. Okay. So once I have this space filled, I'm going to grab a lighter green, and I'm going to add some light green tones in there. And I'm doing like the same kind of lines. I'm trying to fill more of that blue space in so that I don't see a bunch of blue space, because it doesn't make too much sense to have a bunch of blue on the ground. It is nighttime, theoretically, so shadows might be cast and you might be having some more of a blue light effect on these things, technically. But I'm going to try to fill that space. Go, 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 go. I'm really slow with my lines today. Just taking my time. Don't judge me, guys. So much judgment. No, I'm just kidding. So, again, if you're using markers or crayons, these are stackable type things. If you are using markers and crayons, and if you are using a white piece of paper, you want these lines to be super close together. Sometimes I even take the wrapper off my crayon color, and I might even drag it along the background so that the tone is at least pretty much all green. And then on top of that, I would add all these little marks. But we definitely want the texture of the grass in our paper. So, again, if you're using white paper, really try to fill the space. Fill it, fill it, fill it. Close, close, close. So, it's not as important that I 100% fill the space. It's more important for you. Now I'm getting my dark green. I'm going back over my dark green lines. Getting more wild in there. Giving that grassy texture. Alright, so now I'm grabbing a black, and I'm starting to add some more lines in black, but I'm not going too crazy with the black, okay? Just want them a little bit dark here and there. So it's really easy to go too far with black. Don't go too far. Because when you go too far, you can't take it away. It's harder to fix, especially when it's super dark. It's always easy to add. And once I have enough grass down, I'm going to actually start to add some shadows into my pumpkin with the black too. So I like to go towards the edges of my pumpkin a little bit, especially the bottom. The bottom is obviously going to cast some sort of a shadow. So I'm trying to edge out the pumpkin a little bit, cast a little bit of a shadow. And I get push hard when I am close to the pumpkin, but I get lighter as I'm away. I'm going over the pumpkin lines a little bit. Little bit. If you feel like your pumpkin is set and it does not need shadow along these edges, don't touch it. It should be fine. I just like to add a little bit more of a boldness to my pumpkin. It's my preference. But again, I'm hardly pushing down. If you're using crayon or colored pencil, that should be easy to not get too carried away. If you're using marker, marker is going to go a long way, so be careful if you're using marker. Okay. And then I'm going to add some little lines here and there, fixing up a little bit before I move on. Getting into my stem now. I'm going to outline it a little bit, give it some shade in the middle of it. Okay. So, top-notch pumpkin right there. I do say so myself. So, next up we're going to be thinking about our sky. So it's going to be a nighttime sky. So I like to add, oh, by the way, you see me kind of like smudging a little bit with my fingers. Sometimes you can blend that way. I wouldn't go too crazy with smudging because it's a bit messy, especially with oil basil. So we're going to think about our sky. I always like to think of the painting Starry Night by Vincent van Gogh. It's kind of a loose type of painting that he has painted. So you got lines going all over the place, and it kind of gives it the illusion that it's a windy night, and it's a pretty cool looking painting if you've ever seen it. So I'm going to get with my moon, and I like to make a crescent moon. So I'll make a letter C, and yes, I use yellow for my moon, especially if it's on this blue paper. I want to kind of give it the illusion that my moon is glowing. So I'm going to get this moon colored in with yellow. I don't know what I'm taking care of right now, but something is happening. Okay, so I'm going to fill it in with yellow. I'm trying to fill in most of that space so it looks nice and neat. Now with white, I like to add into the yellow a little bit with some white, give it a little bit more of a brighter look. Even edge it a little bit. Gives it more detail, makes it look fancy. Fancy moon. And then I'm going to fill in this empty space in the middle with some white. And I use the side of my pastel for this, so I lay it down and I push. So I'm dragging it. Then I go around the outside of my moon. And what's cool about this effect is that it makes it kind of look like it's like a foggy kind of night. And so that moonlight is illuminating that fog a little bit. Illuminating. And now I'm adding these little marks that go like circular around the moon. So Vincent van Gogh's Starry Night has lots of these little choppy lines, but they all have a direction that they're going in. So like I'm picturing a circle around the moon, and I'm kind of moving in a circular way with all these broken little lines. Now I'm going to follow these little windy lines that I'm adding. Maybe there's a swirl, like it's a windy night. So if you're using white paper, you're obviously not going to be using a white anything right now. You'll probably just use your paper. So kind of work with what you got. But I'm going to take some blue, and I'm going to try to fill the space. So this is a lot of layering and a lot of different colors and a lot of different lines. Filling. So we're trying to capture the movement of the wind with these action lines in action. And I'm going to be using mostly cool colors for this. So like blue and purple. No greens. We already have greens. And I know yellow isn't a cool color, but that's the moon. Leave the moon alone. Don't mess with my moon. So I'm even adding these lines close-ish, there we go, I can talk, to the moon. Little dashed lines, but I'm trying to fill the space. Fill it, fill it, fill it. So again, especially if you have white paper, you want these lines to get very close together. You can even take whatever you're using and kind of drag it along to kind of color the whole space and then do these lines on top of it. I'm going to be grabbing some purple. The purple will give these bold looking lines. So you see that I go over it and over it and over it again. Lots of layers, like an onion. Or something else that's layered, like a layered cake. Now I want food. Or a roll. Add. Ooh, look at you. You're looking fancy, Mr. Sky. Thank you. You're welcome. And then I'm going to be taking out some blue again and going back over it. And then I'm probably going to take some white again and go over that. So I'm going to stop talking. And you can just watch as I layer and layer and layer. Because now, hopefully you got the idea of it. These are kind of loose lines, not perfect. Okay? So, get loose about it. And I can't wait to see your pumpkins, so make sure when you're done with them, you take a picture and show me on Seesaw. Don't do the thing where you tell me in a post that you've done it. I want proof. Okay? So actually, show it to me. So, I can't wait to see your pumpkins. They're going to look great. And go team!